Hi, I'm David Yu, and this is my video about the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. I was lent this rather stunning metallic white example on Friday and had it for the weekend, and I have to say I've had rather a lot of fun in it. I've not had much first-hand experience of modern Alfa Romeos, but this one was the one I've always been reading about and heard how good it was and how it's a very viable competitor to the M3, so I thought I'd give it a try. This demonstrator comes complete with the carbon ceramic brakes, front and rear, and they're very sticky Pirelli P0 Corsa track spec tyres. It's a handsome car, I think, without being overtly aggressive. I certainly think the M3 with its wide wheel arches and stick-on bits looks more aggressive than this, but that can also be a good thing, as it slides under the radar. People don't really know what it is. And for those who do know what it is, there's the Quadrifoglio 4-leaf clover badge, show which model it is. So let's have a look at the interior. This comes with the very nice carbon buckets, very supportive, Alcantara and leather. The steering wheel is the ultimate material fetishist steering wheel. It comes with carbon fiber, aluminium, leather and Alcantara. So a tactile delight. Just show you the rear of the carbon buckets. They're a pretty expensive option, but they hold you in very well and are very, very comfortable over long distance as well. Overall, the interior is pleasantly well built, solid. May not have the ultimate in build quality compared to, say, an Audi, but it's certainly very comfortable and practical. Give it a quick start.
So check before you travel at nationalroad.co.uk/August. Contact your local train company.
I think it sounds pretty good.
Working for you.
Probably more characterful than the M3's straight six. And the engine, of course, is 3/4 of the V8 unit used in the Ferrari 488. And more about that in a minute. So let's take it out for a quick spin. We'll drive it in the DNA mode, which is dynamic, which I think is the right one for the road. Race surprisingly turns the traction control completely off, and more about what I'm going to talk about later, that does make the handling quite interesting, particularly on the road. The steering is very light and direct. Now, I'm going to try not to mention the C word too often when reviewing this car, C being character or charm, but what I will end up having to use a lot of, I'm afraid, is the F word, which is Ferrari, because having driven a lot of Ferraris and owned a few as well, I've got to say the thing that this car reminds me of is a Ferrari 4-door saloon, which I don't think they've ever made a production one. But this car has a lot of Ferrari DNA in it. The way it turns in particular, it has a very direct front end and actually a very mid-engine feel as well. I don't think it is a particularly rear biased weight distribution, but that's the way it feels when it drives. Particularly, like I said before, when you get the back end sliding, which it's very easy to do in race mode. So plus sides are the handling, I think, is a cut above the equivalent M3. It has a very agile, light feeling chassis. It wants to turn. It's very eager to get into corners, and when you do slide, provided you've got enough space to play with it, I was lucky enough to take it out briefly on an airfield yesterday. Provided you've got enough space to play with it, it is a real delight. It'll just oversteer for Italy, basically. A lot trickier to catch, a lot finer knife edge balance than the M3, but it really wants to rotate into corners and then help you out. So I love that aspect of it. Downsides are, I don't think the engine feels as strong as its claim. 507 horsepower, I believe, is the claim from Alfa Romeo, and everybody I've taken out in it seems to feel that it doesn't have the kick in the back that you'd expect 507 horsepower to have. It's a very light car. It's one of the few saloons to claim less than 1,600 kilos, but the power to weight is not noticeably better than that of the heavier and less powerful M3, for example. But the agility comes out in terms of the way it handles. I said that's its strong point. Other strong points are the ride is incredibly good. I've got it in dynamic mode at the moment, and the damper's in dynamic. You can probably see through the camera. It's a little bit firm, but you can press the soft damper button, which Michael Schumacher helped Ferrari develop back in the I think it's a 360 Stradale. So it's the first car that brought that out, and Ferraris have all featured it since then, and Alfa Romeo have clearly taken that advice on board as well. So you can have it in its most aggressive settings. It also applies in race. You can press the soft damper mode, and even the bumpiest roads are easily dealt with very nicely. So a lot of traffic right now, so I'm not going to be extending the car to any extent. But as I said, I had a proper drive with it yesterday on a bit of a trip up to Leicestershire on some very nice roads and on an open runway set up as a sprint circuit, and the car really came alive there. Where this car excels is in the handling, in its character. Well, sorry, I wasn't going to say the C word, was I? But yes, its dynamic repertoire, its highlight is definitely in the handling and the ride. The power is obviously there, because I'm sure it does produce its claim power, but maybe the torque isn't as high as you'd expect if it came from one of the German big power cars. However, it makes up for it with that handling. Other downsides, it does have its usual Italian Alfa Romeo quirks. Yesterday it kept telling me I had a low tyre pressure warning, despite showing me the actual tyre pressure was exactly the same as all the other tyres. It kept on showing me it had a low pressure, and at one point, in fact, just cruising home gently on the motorway, it put up a check engine light, which would then not clear. We had to switch the engine off a few times this morning before that would finally clear. But to be fair, the car never left me stranded. It doesn't have the squeaks and rattles which you might fear initially from an Italian interior. So they've definitely got the build quality up. This car's done 7,000, I presume, pretty hard miles, but it still feels pretty solid and rattle free. So Alfa Romeo have come on a long way. The electronic glitches are one thing. Another aspect of this that really annoyed me, you can choose between A, which I presume stands for all weather, N for normal, and D for dynamic, which is what it's in now. But when you switch to race, which turns traction control off, obviously makes everything at its most aggressive setting, you can't have a digital speedo. So I don't know what Alfa Romeo were thinking. Apparently somebody said on the forums that's just for UK models, but just where you need to know what speed you're doing, when it's the most important to know what speed you're doing, i.e. when you're racing or on track or driving at its hardest, you can't have a digital speedo. And the analog speedo, in common with a lot of analog speedos, is an afterthought with only 20-mile-an-hour increments displayed on the dials. So that's a really bizarre Alfa Romeo quirk. But then, would it be an Alfa Romeo out there? So long-term reliability, I have no idea. I mean, you know, reports are that it's actually a pretty solid car. Makes a lovely noise. I think the V6 is very characterful. It's definitely shot through with Ferrari DNA. You can absolutely see that. And that brings us on to price, because the base list price of this car is £60,000, which is quite high. And with options like the carbon seats and carbon brakes, you're going to add, you know, 10-15 grand on top of that, which is pretty chunky. But then again, you can spec an M3 to over 90 grand. So is it really that outrageous? Probably not. However, when you look at the fact that really, I think you're buying the closest you can get to a four-door Ferrari for 70 grand, let's say, then it becomes actually a pretty good value. So overall, I do really like this car. I think it has a lot of plus points. And would I buy one? Well, the young family and a dog. Unfortunately, saloon will never suit my lifestyle. Whilst that's the situation, I need a hatchback. It's my M140. or an estate car. If Alfa made an estate version of this, I would definitely consider it. But for me, a saloon is out. However, dynamically, would I consider it? What I love about it is the handling, and it's a genuinely special car. You getting to learn how to drive this car properly over an ownership period of years would be deeply rewarding, I think. And at 60-70 grand is a bit pricey, but let's see, when they've devalued over 3 years, who knows? Alfas don't traditionally hold their value very well, but this one might be better than the previous models. However, as a second-hand buy in 3 years' time, could be an outstanding bargain. Plus, of course, that engine is a 2.9 litre V6 twin turbo. It's got potential for further tuning. As you know, I'm fond of a bit of modding, so 600 horsepower version, one of these. I mean, Alfa Romeo are bringing out 600 version in the coupe that's just been announced. So 600 horsepower aftermarket for a 3-year-old example could actually be a really interesting and intriguing performance bargain. So anyway, that's my very brief impressions of the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Thank you for watching, and thank you very much, Alfa, for lending me the car. Thanks.